October 26th working session of the Historic Preservation Commission. I don't think we need to formally have a motion to begin the session. Is that correct, Alex or Marie? So the meeting is now called to order. David, as you know, David has been working assiduously on some suggested changes. I think all with a view to be sure that our standards are consistent throughout. And when he and I got together, I think a week ago Tuesday, he actually said that he started on some of this 18 months ago. So hopefully we can at least button up this section. I provided you all with both clean and marked versions. I tried to take for the people who submitted comments, I tried to sort of coalesce them in, and there were really, with the exception of a couple of comments that I left in, they've all been absorbed into this. And I would say that sort of the overarching questions that remain beyond specific wording, our official standard is to not approve anything that would be incongruous with the historic district. There are two other words that get worked into here. One is the word compatible, and the other was, there's at least compatible, and the other one is appropriate. And I think what David and I agreed for the purpose of this draft, and David, if I'm wrong, please correct me, is that we were going to substitute the word permitted for appropriate. If something is not appropriate, people would have to make the case to us why it should be approved. And so saying that it was not permitted was as good. I've left compatible in a couple of places. I had a brief conversation with Alex about that, and certainly I would consider that to be a topic for discussion today. But I thought maybe what we would try to do is just work through this suggestion. David, I'm sorry, do you have anything else you'd like to say at the outset? Okay. Turn your microphone on.
Also sent around to everybody some funny stories about Windows and a little movie, so hope you guys enjoyed it. The movie, by the way, was taken by me in Providence last week, so it's authentic.
In Providence?
Yeah.
Rhode Island. I will have one question. So the shimmering effect that you get, that is a function of a true divided light window with the sort of glass that would have been traditional here in years past,
Exactly.
and which you do not get when you get simulated divided lights, et cetera. Good. So let us just dig into B, exterior walls and trim. I would have argued that in most, the other thing is that we have in most cases deleted the phrase wherever possible. Again, if it's not possible, people are going to tell us that. I wanted to do X, but I couldn't find it, or it doesn't exist, or it's no longer legal, whatever it is. So those have been deleted more for clarity than anything else. Anyone have comments on any of the items in section B?
I do, of course. Just out of curiosity, well, the first part is using the word permitted. I guess, and maybe there's a reason for it, but these are just my thoughts. We issue a certificate of appropriateness, and I believe that's consistent with using the word appropriate. The standards have specifically words about must, should, or is not appropriate. So if we do change and use a word like permitted, we would have to change the standards and make sure we do, and take out this language about how is not appropriate is used.
And that's on page 3, right?
Correct.
And so I looked back and said, when we first adopted this form that we've been dealing with since, it was May of 2019 when this version was adopted. Not permitted, like should and must were the main words that were put into play. So if the commission wants to go that route, we need to make sure that we're consistent, as Roxanne's mentioning throughout the
Yes,
document.
and you know, we use the word permitted is not in the glossary, but the word appropriate is. So we would have to also amend the glossary. And then we need to just make sure, and this is a good example of why, like, I know when we did the section on roofs, David was, you wanted to get that in front of council, but this is a good example of why you would not do that, because now we have to go back and anything else we've changed to make sure we don't use that word appropriate. So it does affect the standards largely. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, I'm just saying. And then I also had an issue with the word permitted, because does that mean a permit has to be issued? Or what does permitted mean? So that's why it really needs to be in the glossary, because you guys deal with permits all the time, and there could be a confusion, right? I mean,
And I would just kind of high level here, just to kind of hopefully set the tone for the rest of the discussion too. One, thank you for, David and John and the others who have provided the input ahead of the meeting to hope to facilitate the discussion a little bit, maybe quicker through our hour that we have allotted. But let's make sure that we are, really looking at what we believe to be improvements to the document where we've noticed, it needs a shot in the arm. If, maybe we don't have to make more wholesale changes if we can still accomplish the same. Also, historic district, and I'm going to say this word even though that's not the term we use anymore, they're still guidelines. There's some standards in there, and of course we call them standards now, and that was based on the change from Chapter 160D when that was adopted by the General Assembly. But this is not like a typical zoning or regulatory document. So the terms like permit, like, let's keep it congruous, compatible, you should consider this, look at alternatives here. It kind of does need to be more suggestive than true hard and fast regulatory. So just keep that. Now, there's instances where it has to be abundantly clear that something is not allowed, not permitted,
Right.
not considered or otherwise.
I would be quite happy going back to not appropriate. I failed to realize it was already in the standards. So I think,
and it's
when
what
we
we
discuss-
issue, a certificate of appropriateness. I like the word appropriate.
Permitted or allowed. Why not change the word permitted to allowed, which accomplishes the same objective, but takes care of the problem of what is a permit and what is permitted.
except we already have a perfectly fine word that's already in the glossary. It's already defined. Let's stick with it. I missed that when we had our discussion.
Yeah, first of all, back to Alex, at 10,000 feet or whatever, the goal is to be consistent throughout. And while I wouldn't have any problem with introducing a new phrase into the glossary, I'm also perfectly fine with going back to what it is and having to make fewer changes, not more. Again, as long as we remain consistent throughout, because that's what will make this overall a better document, which is, at the end of the day, it's not quite, it isn't the law of the land. It's not that black and white, and it's not intended to be.
And that's why it has the process that it has to go through.
Do we have like a definition for not appropriate
Yes, in the glossary.
and like penalties, like, or there is no penalty. It is just a, this is not.
Penalties are not the purview of this document or the commission.
Right.
No.
You
So
would get
that-
your certificate of appropriateness if it's appropriate. If it's not, we wouldn't issue one.
Yeah.
I guess that would be the penalty.
Right.
I mean, we just wouldn't issue the
That's the
certificate.
carrot and stick, right?
Because I feel like permitted makes it seem like there is a penalty attached if you, or permitted, excuse me.
Yes.
So appropriate is probably a better word.
Existing standards must not, and is not appropriate are all essentially meaning the same thing.
Yeah.
Not make a new.
And, must and should are pretty prevalent in this document, but appropriate or not appropriate, it's not. So it's something easy to overlook.
So we are then good with all of the changes, with the exception of we're taking permitted out and leaving appropriate in at the end of number 5.
My suggestion.
I had the issue on appropriate, and then I would just suggest, and maybe Kara can do this because she's very good at it. In paragraphs 3 and 4, there's, we're using Oxford commas in some places and we're not using them in others. We have an opportunity,
I'll do it. I'll do the whole thing.
when we're
all
all
of them.
done, right, we have an opportunity to do it and be consistent and give it to council and it will look good. And I know you'll do, she'd do
will.
it, would
I'll
do
do
a great
it.
job with that.
I have a note from 2 work sessions previous, I think, with an asterisk there, said Kara will provide
Yes.
the Oxford commas.
I'll do it.
Perfect.
I'm totally comfortable giving my proxy to Kara in all matters related to commas, inclusion of or exclusion of.
This will be my legacy. Thank you.
I,
don't think
comma,
we need a
truly,
motion.
comma, agreed, period.
I did want to just kind of get the commission's thoughts on item number 2, the change from should to must about exterior walls that are contributing, that, change to must be retained and preserved. Before we had wherever possible. It seems like it would be nice to have some sort of allowance for these instances where it truly can't be retained for one reason or another. And maybe it's a point where there's been some sort of damage or deterioration that has to be removed, and let's say it doesn't meet current code, and so when it has to come back, now it has to, we don't want to create too many rubs or conflicts if we can. So I kind of want to get maybe some discussion with the group on that.
I go back to the point that if we say must, and we don't put in wherever possible, and someone comes to us and says, look, I just can't. It's deteriorated beyond repair or what have you. I'm going to consider that that's an acceptable approach for us to take, and that's one of the reasons why we have the hearing in the first place.
Do you find that people don't even bring it to us if it says must and they think that, like, there's no way we'll approve it? Does that make sense? If there's no wherever possible, they would still bring it to you?
Well, history says, yeah, they bring all kinds of stuff that's not permitted.
Yeah.
I don't think we have any statistics on who
Sure.
didn't make an application because they thought it would get denied.
I just don't want to be overly burdensome if there is a real situation. Let's think there's, I know we've had some instances before where there's been some sort of weather-related event or some other act of God, or there's opportunities where someone can move and advance, but still protect the overall character in a way that would meet the standards. I would hate to create a 45-plus day process for someone who's maybe really in a bind and they can still meet the intent. If the depth, the dimension, the profile, if we establish their substitute materials, which we have in various degrees, we want to encourage as much as possible or wherever possible, the retaining of that exterior feature.
Alex, is the issue that when you start talking about exterior features, there's the possibility that there could be damage and the person just wants to get it repaired very quickly because they don't want water getting in or whatever it is?
That's just probably one example, and we can't foresee every circumstance when we do this. Trust us, we try that a lot when we write the real rigid codes, because we don't want to create too many burdens here. But I just want to make sure when we're going through that, especially when something's changing from a should to a must, that we're making sure there's a relief valve somewhere that's really practical. We want to make sure we're not being impractical with it. And I'm not saying that this might be the case, but too, let's think, has there been a situation where, oh man, this standard, if it were stronger, we could have really preserved that true architectural feature, that defining feature, and now that character is completely lost and we won't get it back because we weren't able to retain it.
Let me, a little history, and let me make a suggestion. First, the history. When I started doing this, one of my goals was to get rid of as many shoulds as I could that were reasonable, so that we would have grounds upon which to reject something. Whereas at this point, a lot of people in the construction community know that if it says should, they can ignore it. It's gotten to be pervasive, I would say. So knowing that I also had to get the approval of 6 other commissioners, I thought, how do I put must in there and soften it a little bit? So I stuck in wherever possible. Let me suggest that we add a clause in Historic Preservation Commission where we talk about must and is not appropriate and so on. Let's add a sentence in there that describes if something required by the standards is not possible, the applicant is free to explain why it's not possible and propose an alternative.
They have that opportunity.
Well-
I don't think we would have to build that in. the language.
That was, I think, in many cases, the red is a change that I made, and the blue is a change that someone else made. Just as I sort of sequentially went through marking the document up. And that was my view, Alex, was that anytime something is not possible, and people in the construction business will know, is it possible or is it not? I mean, I think in my almost, I'd say 5 3/4 years, I think we've only denied 2 or 3 applications. And if our goal is to be the Historic Preservation Commission, does that imply that our standards could have been at least a little bit higher without being onerous? We're not the Spanish Inquisition here, we don't want to be. But I think to David's point, if you say yes all the time to anyone who comes before us, and almost by definition, they're coming before us with a deviation from the standards of some magnitude, great or small, that's why I think I took wherever possible out and put the burden on the applicant to say why it is not possible. But the goal was not to be oppressive.
And I don't think that, I would hope that would never be the goal, nor to create where more opportunities for denial, or that's not our goal. Our goal is to prevent which will be incongruous with the special character district. These are our tool. This is our mechanism to make sure that that's ensured and that we can carry it out and carry it out appropriately. Play on words there.
I happened to meet with Tom Pashley, the CEO of the resort, Tin Lasers, and I said, the one thing that we know is when Calvin comes before us, it's going to be buttoned up. It's probably going to be acceptable. If it isn't, it will have been well thought out as to why it can't be acceptable. Now, that we expect a higher standard from them than we by an individual person who comes before us, but they have to abide by the same set of standards. The resort just has resources to make sure that happens the first time around. So, I don't know.
Can I play a devil's advocate, psychologically speaking? As someone who was told repeatedly, ask forgiveness, not permission, I feel like anytime there is, anytime it seems like there is no wiggle room and someone just approaches this and thinks the HPC is never going to approve this, it leaves more room for them to just say, I'll just ask permission, which we've seen multiple times. I mean, ask forgiveness, yeah. So I feel like the wherever possible is the invitation to ask permission, if that makes sense.
Come back to us with 44 requested changes.
Yeah.
To an
That have
otherwise
already happened.
perfectly lovely and acceptable house, but nonetheless.
Well, let me go back to suggesting we add a sentence. The goal of the sentence would be to tell an applicant that if he wishes to do something that is explicitly not allowed, that he will have to justify, good word, justify why it's not possible,
David, are you saying that in this section specifically or in a more overarching way?
the overarching.
Okay.
It's already part of the system, yeah. And if they want to come and ask for forgiveness, that's determined. Again, I feel like we're taking the wrong approach. I think we're thinking we need to make some changes to be punishable. I'm gaining that sense.
No, it's not a punishable thing. It's just
It's
there.
seeming that way.
No, there's just some things, in my opinion, there's just some things, and we haven't seen them yet, that will be irreversible. And if our job is to keep things congruous, I don't want to see that. I don't want to.
And that's our job. And so we go back to, was there a situation in where some exterior walls that the commission or someone has deemed to contribute to the historic form and character of a structure must have been retained? And maybe it's the document I have, but I see where wherever possible is actually stricken. But then there's also an underline there. So it's questionable to me whether or not it's even included here or not.
I think David had included that language, and then whoever did the text, it might have been John, took it out.
Okay.
So that's why it's both underlined.
So it
and-
seems like maybe we need some discussion at least on just those two words being included in this clause with the group.
Well, you're going to get your chance because there are 3 or 4 other places where I did the same thing. I would like to propose that we move on, let us circle back to that because it's going to come up again 3 or 4. And I think as we look through all 3 or 4, we'll either come to agreement that we got to leave it in or not. Probably everywhere, not, but maybe not. Maybe we'll leave it in here, but not other places.
And
Is
we,
that acceptable?
yes, we also struck that wherever possible clause when we were doing the introductory language. So if we're going to put it back in, we need to remember to go back and do it there also. When we first started this process,
Did the roof section.
Oh, okay.
There's-
even before the roof, there was some introductory where we took out that language.
We have it again here in number 4, just on the
Sure.
same page. And I don't, Alex, I don't think we're singling out number 2 as a specific example, but we have wherever possible at the end of paragraph 4 also. I mean,
We take a straw vote and make a decision now, move on?
no, let's, a non-binding indication of preference.
I'm
Who
happy-
would favor including, leaving wherever possible in to the language?
Everywhere or just here?
Everywhere.
Presumably everywhere, but specifically here.
I'm happy either way. I just want to move on.
That's not a
Right.
vote.
I-
You have to
I'm
vote.
happy-
You can't vote both.
Yeah, okay.
I'll vote for leaving it in.
Who would like
Take it
to
out.
leave it in? Carol wants to leave it in, Carl wants to leave it in, and Richard wants to leave it in. That's 3. Who would like to take it out?
I'd like to discuss it more, though. I think Alex had a good point. Let's table it, because it's going to apply to all these categories. Let's get through this, and then we'll come back and discuss
We
it
have a leaning in the
overall.
direction of taking it out, but we do not have a final decision,
Okay.
subject to further conversation, which is going to come up even in section C. Once, twice, 2 more times. So with the exception of the wherever possible discussion, comments on section C. I will circle back to wherever possible at the end here.
Not entirely obvious to everybody, the graphic at the bottom, which is more explanatory than anything, is brand new. It was not in the original.
Helpful.
Again, I would submit that based on our previous conversation, that the word permitted is struck and we leave the word appropriate in on the end of that.
I had a question on number 3.
Sure.
The last sentence or line in number 3 talks about the original in scale, size, material, and color with the character of the structure. I think we should add the word compatible with the character of the structure, just so it reads clearer, and then compatible is the language that the standards use.
Agree,
That was a
disagree.
mistake. Should be.
Is it?
that- Yeah, it was a
Yeah, I
mistake.
think the word compatible should be in there.
Yeah, that was my mistake.
Okay.
And color and compatible with.
Not and, just compatible. And color compatible with the character of the structure, period.
By the way, there was a little bit of rewording here because there was a blending between replacement and then number 4 said repair or replacement, which I felt was covered in number 3, which was why I suggested taking replacement out.
Sorry, Roxanne, can you read that one more time?
Sure. The sentence would read fully, if a window, door, or feature is completely missing and/or is to be replaced, it must be replaced with a new window, door, or feature, the original, hang on, or feature matching the original in scale, size, material, and color compatible with the character of the structure.
Any other comments? And again, we will circle back on the where permitted, or I'm sorry, wherever possible.
I mean, I'm not happy there's, first, I screwed this up, so it's my mistake. So if it matches the original,
It's going to be compatible.
it's going to be compatible. Or even if it wasn't compatible, we can't prevent them from replacing in kind something that exists. So the matching is, the word matching is now, I like the based on is better, because that presumes that you're replacing it with something that's not exactly in kind, and therefore might be
I agree.
incompatible.
On second reading, I agree with that.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
Just so we can keep notes, we're going back to the,
Door or feature based on, and deleting matching the original.
also, David, it is much easier to review the work that has already been done than to do the work from the beginning. I think that,
Very kind of you.
trust me, I've been told a few times.
Moving on to the second page of 5. Or
Oh,
second-
I still had, I'm sorry. You had, oh, I'm sorry. C, 4C. I would like to eliminate the plural and make it singular, because we're talking, I'm trying to read these corrections. If the existing window incorporates divided lights, the replacement window, it should be window, should or must have true or simulated divided lights. You're talking about one window. If the existing window incorporates divided lights, the replacement window, that should be singular, not plural, right?
I agree.
Kara, someone? Right.
Getting the tense right, that's all.
That's a nit. Okay, that's it.
Yes. Other comments?
4A, the wooden windows on street-facing elevations being replaced in kind, must be replaced in kind. That is I want to call that probably the most significant change on this item, so I just want to make sure everyone's in agreement with that.
Does that mean you cannot put a vinyl-clad window to replace a wood window? Is that
Even
what
if
that
the-
says?
Even if the window is wooden, but it's got aluminum cladding on it, yeah, I know that's,
No, I think it means you would have to come before us to let us say it's okay. Now, I think, and Pam, you may know more about this, it was either Southern Pines or Aberdeen who has a much stricter standard for replacement of wood windows and an extensive document about why they believe in the long run wood is actually better than aluminum, different from much of what we have heard in my tenure from builders. I'm not
It's all
expert
about
enough.
price. I mean, people come with other windows because of price, that's it. On the other hand, in my mind, at the detail level, the windows on the front-facing elevation are probably the most important detail with regard to architecture anyway, that there is. So if you've got an old wood window that's in good shape and has a broken muntin or a piece of glass that's broken, or you want to add shutters to it, or whatever you're doing to that window, I think you ought to preserve as much as you can what exists.
Right, and this section is repair, this is not replace. Replace would be under section 3, and this doesn't exist there, which that's, I guess, a question whether, if we're that insistent on it in repair, would we allow you to replace the window with a non-wooden window? And the other question I would ask, having
could we,
been the
could we
owner.
put be repaired in kind instead of replaced? Because that's how 4A reads, be replaced in kind.
It's a subparagraph, though, to the section 4, which is talking only about replacement, right? I mean,
Correct.
repair. No, we took
But or
replacement out.
replacement has been struck.
Yeah.
Right.
So the whole,
Only repairs.
Yeah, I agree with Alex. It ought to be repair in kind.
See, because you struck the language, repair or replacement in 4, this subparagraph isn't making sense now.
Those unintended consequences that happen
Exactly.
when we start to, put Frankenstein together and.
Exactly.
Well, as I'm now reading it, in B, 4B, we say windows are repaired or replaced. Has that, the provisions of that already been covered under 3, so we can take replaced out, so that we're just talking about repairs?
Right. I agree. And with, going back briefly, if possible, to 4A, since we're talking about repair, nobody's going to come in with a vinyl clad piece of a window and stick it on a wood window. So
But again, we have work, we are, apologies, because I was the one who took the last cut at this. We're using the word replaced again in a section that theoretically applies to repair.
I'm in agreement.
David, what is it that you originally thought you were doing before I messed it up?
I think what we're doing now is fixing places where that don't apply anymore because we're talking about repair, and I think we got them all. Unless I'm wrong.
Excuse me. How does replacement not be covered with repair? I mean, in the sense that you're repairing something, you may have to replace. And you're limiting the concept of repair by taking out the concept of replace. I'm sorry.
He's right. Is there a reason why we changed paragraph 4 to, can we just leave it if repair or replacement? Is there a reason we can't just leave that? Then we don't have to make all these changes.
The goal was that I thought 3 covered replacement and therefore it did not need a separate set of standards. But that may have been an error on my part. I'm not saying I succeeded in the drafting, but that was the intent.
I think it could be beneficial to have a section that covers replacement and a section that covers repairs. And if if repair does cross to total replacement, it's still covered.
Encompass some replacement.
Correct.
Oh, yeah, when you repair a piece of something, you're replacing that piece, but
That's exactly right.
I think that's a nit.
Right, I think what we were going after was, what we were going after was the concept of, to David's point, there are sections where we talk about when there are damaged components, that they should be repaired to the extent possible and made to look like the original. And that's specifically what we say damaged or missing. If it's missing, you're not repairing it, you're replacing it. And I still wonder how you know what it looked like if it's missing, because maybe you didn't own the house and maybe you don't want to go to the Tufts archives and find out, but you possibly could.
If we're going to have 2 paragraphs, I think we're done. If we're going to have 1 paragraph, then I'd like to take another shot at 3 and 4 and come back to you.
I feel like all you'd have to do is move A up to 3, right? Oh, no.
No?
A is the replace one. Oh, wow. Never mind.
C is also replacement.
So all of those are. Could you just flip 4 and 3? So that 3 ends up being the repair and then 4 ends up being the replacement and everything underneath it is
No,
replacement?
but I would argue that the provisions of 3, if a door is being, or if a window, say, is being completely replaced, whether it's missing or not, it's damaged to the point that repair is not possible, so the heck with it, I just want to replace it. We're already covering, without specifying, that if it had divided lights, the new one should have divided lights, because it has to be replaced, based, well, we say based on, which gives you a little wiggle room.
I guess for me, let's say there's an old wooden window, beautiful wooden window like in the little movie. And for some reason, you have to repair a muntin. Then the restriction on repairing that muntin would be different than if the whole window had to be replaced. If the whole window had to be replaced, now you could use, for example, aluminum clad wood instead of wood. From the street, nobody would know.
Person I would designate with the second most experience in this, do you have a view? Because I'm in way over my depth here at this point.
Every time you look at this, every week we look at this, we can argue a different way around it. I mean, at some point, at the end of the day, I know pretty wood window wants to stay. But at the end of the day, the person can swap out a window, even if it says must, if he proves congruity within that structure in the historic district. Wood window may be a beautiful feature to you, and you may see it that way. I may not see it as far as being integral to the architectural theme of that house. I may see this congruous, you may not. That's the beauty of having 6 of us here, right? It's not meant to be cut and dry. It's meant to be
Flexible.
As lay people, as civil people who live in the community, we're all motivated by different things, different architectural features and aspects. So I think maybe probably we can also consider 2 hours going on 5 years. So
I'm with you, Richard. Either way, we just need to make a decision.
even if we take these to musts, someone can still do something completely different. They stand up there and prove their case and show 6 other houses on the block where someone has not, functioned this and still say, hey, it was congruous. Because it's wood clad or it's vinyl, and who knows, COVID, supply chain, we can all reasonably say, hey, they've played their case, we got it, right? So, and there's a certain level of retroactivity we've got to focus on here where we've let a lot of this stuff slide in the past, where now you come back and you say, well, now it's new day, new rules. It's also, now you create even more changes and even more diversity in the historic district with all these different styles, all these different types of product. And, then we've really got no meat behind what we say. So, there's a balance.
I think that's much better said than I have said it. That has been, what I have hoped to do is to establish that the standards, although they may change a little bit, they don't go down. The standard for preservation of that which 4 out of 7 of us at least would agree is what it's all about is maintained. I like the 2 paragraphs because in my head, repair and replace are 2 different things, but I'm not dogmatic about it.
Can we agree on 2 paragraphs?
Paragraphs.
Okay? At least? No. We're not going to 3 paragraphs. The chair rules. I want to try and get through the rest of the document so we can circle back to wherever possible, yes.
If possible.
Wherever,
Whenever
well, it's going to be possible. It's just the question is, do we have 5 minutes or 2 minutes to talk about it? I can already see we're not getting to my section on trees before I go off this commission in January. We're talking about trees.
18 months, John, you have plenty of time.
I don't care if we have to have 4 work sessions a month, so. Let us go to items 5 through new number 13. Comments on that, please.
I could start with paragraph 8. New dormer windows on street-facing elevations should be compatible. My question here is, should this be changed to must? I'm not saying it should be, I'm just questioning, since everything else on here is must. But dormers are not, so I didn't know if dormers were meant to be different. I don't know.
I'm trying to thread the needle here, knowing there are 7 people on the commission. I don't want to do a search for every should and change it to a must and say we're done. I mean, we do have the clause that says must not compromise the architecture of the structure. That's the primary goal
Okay,
of that sentence.
Is there, and I did not catch this earlier, David, is there an implication when you talk about primary elevations that that is also street facing? Or is there a primary elevation could be on the rear or the side?
Where are you reading primary?
You talk about street facing elevations should be compatible, blah, 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 existing windows on primary elevations. So we go from street facing and compare it to primary.
Yeah, that's original language. I didn't change it, so.
But is there, I don't know what is the primary elevation? Is that only street facing or can a,
Well, that's a whole new bag of worms.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
right behind me, yes. The new one Huntley's doing? Yes. Now what is it, Cherokee? It's Everett and Palmetto.
House, I remember we came before us, I don't know which side's the entrance, because they're both so beautiful and grand.
It has more than one primary elevation.
So maybe it's prominence or something that.
Theoretically, it's Everett because that's the address, but it's a corner lot. And again, we get into the street facing and what do you do when you're on a corner lot as a former corner lot owner?
And you have two elevations that must comply, or
To show off.
So your sense of primary would be, it would be street facing even if that's not front
lots have
facing,
more
if you
scrutiny.
will.
right, I would, thinking about this for the first time, I'd change the word primary elevation to street facing elevation.
Primary, the one that the United States Post Office would recognize as the front door?
Not for a historic preservation commission, who cares about the post office?
I'm not, I'm trying to look for something that's analogous so that you can get the primary. I agree. Whether
No.
it's
No, I like, in essence, facing it on one window, it has to be conforming to anything that is street facing. I don't
Right.
think there'd be too many that would have three, but there could be two.
Think of any road, any house on a road, if there's only, it's not a corner lot, I mean, can't think of a single situation where the front of the house would not be the prominent, the primary,
Yep.
the presence, the front foot, whatever you want to call it, that's in front. But corner lot, that's where it comes, that's where it's correct.
Or those 5 or 6 houses on Barrett that also their rear is street facing to Cadell.
Say primary or street facing.
I like the substitution of street facing for primary. I think it covers a lot of, without us having to define it, it covers a lot of potentiality.
We in agreement?
For the question about whether should be must in this case, so David, a dormer window might be of a smaller size than existing windows on other street facing. That may be why that should is there instead of a must.
I'm okay with it. Yeah.
Dormer window might be smaller, might be of a similar style, but it might be smaller than the other windows.
Might have a different placement or orientation than the rest of the
And it
windows.
doesn't say match, it just says
It just says
compatible.
compatible, yeah, can be
Right.
small.
So I
That
think the
fir-
should
that
should
first
probably be
line.
there.
Yeah, I'm okay with.
For keeping the should there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tick, tick, tick.
And then we'll keep,
People are wondering why 9 was stricken, is because it was duplicative with 2.
you remember this time last year when we took the now adopted standards to council, that was a big thing that we did. We got rid of a lot of duplicative language.
Yep.
So apparently we missed some.
That was the only reason why that came out.
Don wasn't chairman then.
I just have to
Blame it on
bring,
Eric.
Eric's fault.
may I just bring something up? Because this really drove me crazy. The book that I was given for standards is a different version than this document that we were asked to change. And this number 9 wasn't in even my standards. So I don't know if myself, maybe Carl and Angelique were given a different book, maybe older, or whether David is working off an older copy and we have the more
I'm
revised
guessing you have
copy.
the newer version, because I'm sure Alex in onboarding would have given you the most current version.
Well, I don't
Keeping in
know,
mind that I did this 18 months ago, there's a good chance it's out of date.
because when we did the whole thing on the shutters, the whole section was totally different than what was in my book, and
What does your second your second page of your document, the inside cover, what's the last amended date that you have? If it's October of '22, you're good. Almost a
October
year ago.
28th of 2022. October of 2022, right here.
You
What
guys
do
should
you
have the
have?
newest one. What's David's?
Well, in here I do, but keep in mind, these red marks are a year and a half old,
Okay. It's just that the,
current then.
yeah, because we're working on amending text that's from an earlier version that's already been changed.
That's the copy I'm going from as well.
The what?
The copy you guys have is the same one that I'm working from. That's the one we should be looking
Okay.
from.
Okay, that's what I'm,
And David had worked on this, it sounds like, with these copies he's had for quite some time
okay,
prior to.
that explains it.
So somebody
It just makes it harder.
ought to go through my red marks and translate them to the new version.
If you need a clean Word version too, we can provide that. Reflective of the 22.
I think the versions that I sent, Maria, to you were Word versions, so you could do a compare, assuming you have a Word version of the current.
I do.
David, in paragraph number 11, when you say filmed on a glass, do you mean UV film?
Well, first, that's original language, so I haven't changed it. I can't speak to what they meant. I would interpret it to mean that it's changing the look of the glass. If it's a tint or it has a reflective characteristic to it, then I would say that's a film.
That's objectable.
That's not good.
What about the UV film that is to prevent fading?
If you have a low E coating, it's invisible anyway.
The question, why I raise it, is that somebody may say, if they see filmed on the glass, they may be coming to us unnecessarily if we don't put an exception in for something that is reasonable and that is acceptable.
I'm okay with that.
Back to Richard's point that anything anywhere in here, someone can come to us and say, this is why I want to do it differently.
Want to do it differently, it's that it is something that people do to protect flooring,
Oh, no, I understand. I understand the why.
so they don't come here for that purpose. You're just, if someone looks at it and says, well, I have to go and ask them for permission. No, that's ridiculous. If we know that it's acceptable, then take the exclusion. Why would you force someone to come to you to ask for it?
Question, is there another type of the same type of tint that is not for that purpose, but looks the same? And are we then permitting that? I don't know the answer.
I don't either. I don't know if you can tell if it's got UV film on it or not. If you can't, then of course it's okay.
Can you just add or anything, like, that changes the appearance of the glass?
That would be maybe
That's really hard to,
but yeah, it's a
subjective.
nice way of looking at it to say, well, no pun intended. Maybe it's not a looking glass, but maybe you can not see it, but it's permissible. It's still a film. And someone putting a film on a window, on glass window is, I
It's
brought
okay
it
by
up.
me.
I don't want to cause celeb. Whatever everyone thinks, I'm going to.
I'm not sure, have we had any applications come before us where this is an issue? I do not recall
No,
one.
I can think, and again, there's a lot of consult that happens with staff. One particular type application that I could think of, and I don't think that was ever the intent, was to keep, I think most windows have some sort of tint built in, ever so slightly.
Especially now, yeah.
But the one application I can think of was, there was a consideration for the Fair Barn. If you guys have been at a Fair Barn event at the right time of day, and you want to use a projector or any other thing in there, you can forget it. Yeah, so the village was considering putting some sort of tent or film on some of those windows. And you can imagine that depending on which windows, that could really impact the view of that structure. So that's where this had been a safeguard before. So I think it's working. I don't think we have any issues with it, but let's keep that in the back of our minds as we move forward in case that it is a little too burdensome. when
We're
we know
obviously
that
not
those
going to
applications
finish
are
this
there.
today. I think when I read this, my analogy was to things you sometimes see on automobiles. And that's probably not the right analogy because builders, that's not what they do, to tint windows in houses.
It's gonna be more in a commercial application. I see it as Alex said in the Fairbond. But, I mean, here's, the other way you look at this is, if it's on the inside of the house, it's really.
Some of it's on the outside, however.
Yeah, but, I mean, for this one, there's innate subjectivity in this one. There has to be.
I only
Fairmont would
wanted to
come
bring it
before
up.
us,
I
and
only
we would,
wanted to bring it up
we'd say, hey,
because
that
of
makes
that was-
perfect sense, we're good,
It'll probably be something that we know it when we see it, that it's truly impacting, compliance with this standard. I really think that, or if someone's, again, the word painted to me is also saying, it's, the tint or the film to me is, like a mural or something that someone's trying to place on a window, which obviously you would think could be, again, impactful, so.
Christmas time, you have the little spray paint to show the snow.
Big snow.
snowflakes on
That's
the windows. I mean,
temporary.
That's, that's painted, right? So,
I liked the language the way it was, that limited it only to the exclusion of the front, because there's film you can put on a bathroom window that gives it a effective frosted glass, and that's often used, and now you're saying you can't do that. So I think by just limiting it on the front, I was fine with the way it was for that reason.
What do
But-
you mean on the front?
Well, the language of,
Any window.
the way the language originally read was not permitted on street-facing elevation, and I was okay with that, because if you wanted to you have a sliding patio door, and you want to film that, because that's where your western sun comes in your backyard, that should be okay. The same with if you have a small bathroom, and you want to put a frosted little, paper on there, you can do that.
I have no desire to terminate the conversation. We're obviously not going to finish this. It's 2 minutes to 4. I would like to propose that we conclude this work session. I think we have some idea of subsequent work that needs to be done and a revisitation of the where appropriate language. But I think people might like a bathroom break for 2 minutes so that in order that we can start on time with the regular session, I would like to, I don't think we need a motion. I think I can merely declare this, the work session is terminated, yes?